You know, money in American politics, it can feel like this massive, powerful force, right? Almost like a force of nature. And it often moves in ways that are just hard to see. Today, we're going to trace the path of that money to understand exactly how it flows, where it's coming from, and maybe most importantly, what it actually buys. So let's start with a mystery. Imagine this. It's the heat of a presidential campaign, and suddenly, $20 million just appears out of thin air, all of it to fund this huge wave of political ads. But the source? Nobody knows. Let's dig in.
Okay, so this mystery, it all revolved around a political action committee, or a PAC. And it had this really strange name, the RBG PAC, named for the famously liberal Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But here's the twist. It was running ads supporting Donald Trump. Now, what's so fascinating here is the timing. The way the rules are set up, this group could spend all of that money in those crucial final weeks right before the election, all while keeping its donor a secret. So the votes get cast, a winner is declared, and all the while the public has no idea who paid for the message they were seeing. Then, a month after the election, we finally get an answer. That $20 million? It came from a trust belonging to Elon Musk. He had channeled a fortune into the election, and he did it without breaking a single rule. So the real question is, how is that even possible? To understand that, we have to go back, way back. To really get how we got here, we've got to rewind the clock to the 1970s and the Watergate scandal. In the aftermath of all that corruption, Congress basically decided, okay, we have to clean this system up. So Congress looked into it, and their report zeroed in on the real problem. This flood of secret and often illegal money that was just poisoning the whole political process. The goal of the new reforms was pretty simple: put an end to the corrupting influence of private money in public life. And what you're seeing here is basically their solution. Think of it like a plumbing system. The new laws were designed to make all the pipes transparent, so you could track every single dollar. And they also made the pipes narrow, putting strict limits on how much any one person could give. The whole idea was to stop the wealthy from having way too much influence. But almost as soon as this new system was put in place, it ran into a huge challenge, a legal fight that would change everything, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And there, a totally new idea was about to take hold. It all came down to this landmark 1976 case, Buckley versus Vallejo. And in it, the Supreme Court drew a really important line in the sand. They said, look, giving money directly to a politician, yeah, that can be limited. It stops that straightforward, I give you this, you do me a favor kind of corruption. But spending money on your own, on things like ads, they argued that was something different entirely. And right there, that's the idea that completely reshaped American politics. The court decided that spending money to get your message out there is a form of speech and is protected by the First Amendment. So you can limit contributions, sure, but you can't limit what someone spends to make their own voice heard. This idea planted the seeds for an even bigger earthquake decades later. Okay, let's jump forward in time to 2010. There's this nonprofit group called Citizens United, and they wanted to release a film that was really critical of Hillary Clinton. But under the existing laws, they couldn't, so they sued, and the case climbed all the way to the Supreme Court. And the court's decision? It was absolutely monumental. It essentially declared that corporations and unions have the same free speech rights as people, and because of that, they could now spend unlimited amounts of money on elections, with one big condition. That spending had to be independent, meaning it couldn't be coordinated with a candidate's official campaign. The floodgates were officially open. This ruling pretty much instantly created this new, incredibly powerful player in American politics. A new kind of pipe, if you will, one that was built to handle a truly unlimited flow of cash. And it's called a super PAC. Now, unlike the old traditional PACs that had those strict fundraising limits, a super PAC can raise and spend infinite amounts of money. The only real rule is that it can't give money directly to a candidate or work with them, but it can run all the ads it wants to help them win. And the impact? It was immediate, and frankly, it was staggering. Just look at this chart. In 2012, the very first presidential election after that ruling, spending by these outside groups just exploded. And by 2024, it had reached levels nobody had ever seen before, completely changing the financial reality of our elections. So the big question is, who's actually pouring all this cash into the system?
A lot of people assumed it would be big corporations, but that's not the whole story. While corporate money is definitely a factor, the biggest players are actually a very small group of incredibly wealthy individuals. They now outspend all the top corporate donors combined.
Which, of course, brings us to the central question in all of this. If these big donors aren't just directly buying votes, what exactly are they buying with all of that money? Well, the answer is the goal isn't always just about picking a winner. It's about shaping the entire conversation. It's about making sure that when the big decisions are being made in Washington, your phone calls get answered, your meetings get taken, and your interests are at the top of the pile. And you don't have to look far to see some pretty clear examples. The Uihlein family put more than $8 million into supporting a senator who later helped get a rule put into a tax bill that reportedly saved their family over $40 million. Peter Thiel put $10 million behind his allies, essentially funding a path to power for one who became vice president. And Elon Musk, after spending nearly $300 million in the 2024 election, was appointed to lead a new government department. And it's not just anecdotes, the research really backs this up. One huge academic study looked at thousands of policy decisions over 20 years, and it came to a really stark conclusion. It found that what average citizens want has basically zero statistical impact on public policy. Meanwhile, the views of the economic elite, they have a huge independent impact on which laws get passed. So what this all leads to is this huge, profound disconnect right at the heart of American democracy. It's this giant gap between what the vast majority of people believe and what our system has actually become. On this particular issue, Americans aren't really divided at all. Polling shows time and time again that a massive majority, we're talking 72%, believe there should be limits on how much money can be spent in our political campaigns. And really, this isn't a Democrat or Republican thing. In a country that feels so divided on so many issues, this is one of the very few things that Democrats, Republicans, and independents almost all agree on. The public wants this to change. Which brings us right back to where we started, with a question. The whole idea behind the Supreme Court's decisions was that spending money is like speech, and we need to make sure all voices can be heard. But if a handful of voices can spend billions to make their message deafening, drowning out pretty much everyone else, you have to ask, in a system built on unlimited money, whose speech really matters?